The phone rang late in the evening, just as I was about to settle in for the night. I stared at the screen, confused. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something about it made me pick up. "Hello?" I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. There was a pause, and then a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Nate, it's me." I froze. I hadn't heard her voice since the day we finalized our divorce. It was Lorelei, my ex-wife, the woman who had turned my life into a living hell. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my tone cold. "Nate, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but something's happened. I need to talk to you." Her voice was shaky, almost desperate, but I couldn't help it. I laughed bitterly. "You need to talk to me? That's rich. After everything you did, now you're calling me for help?" "It's not like that," she said quickly. "Please, just hear me out." I wanted to hang up. I wanted to tell her to never call me again, but something about her tone kept me on the line. Against my better judgment, I said, "Fine. You've got 5 minutes. What's so important?" There was a long pause, and then she said, "I can't do this over the phone. Can we meet?" I almost dropped the phone. The nerve of her to ask me for a meeting after all these years. "Why the hell would I meet you, Lorelei? You're the last person I want to see." "I know," she said softly, "but I promise it's not about us. It's about something bigger." I should have said no. I should have cut her off right then and there. But my curiosity got the better of me. I hated that she still had that power over me, even after everything she had done. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., at Benson's Diner. Don't be late." "I'll be there," she said, relief evident in her voice. I hung up without saying goodbye. For the rest of the night, I couldn't sleep. Memories of our marriage flooded back. Memories I had spent 5 years trying to bury. Lorelei and I had once been happy. Or at least, I thought we were. We had met at a mutual friend's barbecue. She was funny, charming, and had this way of making everyone around her feel like they mattered. I fell for her fast and hard, and within a year, we were married. I thought I had found the love of my life, but it didn't take long for the cracks to show. At first, it was small things. Her staying out late with friends, secretive texts, and a new obsession with her appearance. I chalked it up to her trying to find herself, but then I found the messages. Explicit text between her and some guy named Brent. My heart shattered. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. In fact, she laughed. "You're boring, Nate," she said with a smirk. "I need excitement. Brent gives me that." I filed for divorce the next day. The process was brutal. She fought me on everything. The house, the car, even the dog. By the time it was over, I felt like a hollow shell of the man I used to be. And now, 5 years later, here she was, dragging herself back into my life. I didn't know what she wanted, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to be good. I arrived at Benson's Diner the next morning, 10 minutes early. It was a small, cozy place I used to go to when I needed to clear my head. I hadn't been here since the divorce. Lorelei was already there, sitting in a corner booth. She looked different, older, thinner, and more tired than I remembered. But she still had that air of confidence, like the world owed her something. "Nate," she said as I approached. "Lorelei," I replied coldly, sliding into the seat across from her. "You've got one shot. What do you want?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "Something's happened," she said. "And I didn't know who else to turn to." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Spare me the theatrics. Just spit it out." "It's about my daughter," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I blinked. "You're what?" She looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. "My daughter, Nate. She's 5 years old." The air seemed to leave the room. 5 years. The same amount of time since our divorce. "Don't even try it," I said, my voice rising. "You're not about to tell me she's mine, are you?" Lorelei shook her head quickly. No, she's not yours. She's Brent's." Hearing his name again made my blood boil. "Then why the hell are you telling me this? What does your kid have to do with me?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "Brent's gone, Nate. He left us. And now," she broke off, looking away. "And now what?" I demanded. And now, I don't have anywhere else to go. Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't believe it. After everything she had put me through, after tearing my life apart, she was sitting here asking for my help? What makes you think I'd help you? I said, my voice dripping with disdain. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Because, Nate, I don't have anyone else? I stared at her, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to get up and walk away, to leave her to deal with the mess she had made of her life. But another part of me, the part that still hated how much I cared, couldn't move. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, staring at the woman who had ruined me, wondering how the hell I had ended up back here. The silence between us felt like an eternity. Lorelei kept staring at me, her eyes filled with desperation. I hated that look, hated how it stirred something inside me that I didn't want to feel. Sympathy? Pity? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that I was furious. Furious that she thought she could waltz back into my life and expect me to care. You don't have anyone else? I finally said, my voice laced with sarcasm. What about Brent? Or your other friends? Surely one of them can help. Her face hardened at the mention of Brent. He's gone, she said, her tone sharp now. He left me. Left us. Disappeared without a trace. Do you think I'd be here if I had anyone else to turn to? I leaned forward, my voice low but venomous. And what exactly do you want from me, Lorelei? Money? A place to stay? Because if you think I'm going to clean up your mess after what you did to me, it's not about that, she interrupted, her voice trembling. I don't need your money, Nate. I need your help. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Help? With what? Raising a kid that's not mine? Fixing the life you chose to destroy? Be specific, Lorelei, because I'm not in the business of saving people who betrayed me. She flinched at my words, and for a moment, I saw the cracks in her composure. You don't understand, she said softly. It's not just about me. It's about my daughter. She's in trouble. I frowned, my skepticism warring with curiosity. What kind of trouble? Lorelei hesitated, her hands gripping the coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. There's someone, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone who's been following us, watching us. I think he wants to hurt her. The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. As much as I wanted to dismiss her, to tell her it wasn't my problem, there was something in her voice that stopped me. Fear. Genuine, bone-deep fear. And why would someone want to hurt your daughter? I asked, my tone skeptical but less harsh. She looked away, her eyes darting around the diner like she was afraid someone might overhear. Because of Brent, she admitted. He owed money to some people, dangerous people, and when he disappeared, they came after me. I rubbed my temples, trying to process what she was telling me. So let me get this straight. Brent screws over the wrong people, vanishes, and now they're coming after you and your kid? And you think I can do something about it? Lorelei nodded, her expression pleading. You were always the smart one, Nate. You're resourceful, and you know how to handle yourself. I don't know what else to do. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The same woman who had laughed in my face when I confronted her about her affair, who had called me boring and predictable, was now begging me to save her from a mess she created. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. This isn't my problem, Lorelei. You made your bed, and now you get to lie in it. I know, she said quickly. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for her. She's just an innocent little girl, Nate. She didn't choose this life. Her words cut through me like a knife. As much as I hated Lorelei, I couldn't ignore the fact that a child, an innocent child, might be in danger. But helping her meant getting dragged back into the chaos I had spent years escaping. I need time to think, I finally said, standing up. Don't call me again. I'll let you know if I decide to help. Nate, please. I held up a hand, cutting her off. I'll think about it. That's all I can promise. Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked out of the diner. The cold morning air hit me like a slap, but it wasn't enough to clear my head. My thoughts were a jumbled mess of anger, confusion, and something I didn't want to admit. concern. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything. Lorelei's words kept replaying in my mind, especially the fear in her voice when she talked about her daughter. I didn't want to care, but I did, and that scared me more than anything. By the time night fell, I had made up my mind. I didn't trust Lorelei, but if there was even a chance that her daughter was in danger, I couldn't ignore it. No child deserved to suffer because of their parents' mistakes. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. "I'll help you," I said, my voice firm, "but on my terms. And if you lie to me about anything, I'm done." "Got it. Got it," she said quickly, her relief palpable. "Thank you, Nate. You don't know how much this means to me." I hung up without saying another word. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for the little girl who didn't deserve to pay for her mother's sins. And deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger and much darker than I had anticipated. The next morning, I met Lorelei again, this time at a park on the edge of town. She brought her daughter, a little girl with big, curious brown eyes and dark curls that made her look almost angelic. For a moment, I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite place. Regret? Sadness? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that seeing this innocent child made everything feel a lot more real. "This is Callie," Lorelei said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "Callie, this is Nate." "Hi," Callie said shyly, clutching a stuffed rabbit to her chest. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. The timeline hit me like a brick wall. She was born right around the time Lorelei and I divorced. The math lined up, but it still made my stomach churn. "Hi, Callie," I said, forcing a smile. "That's a nice bunny you've got there." She nodded, her little fingers tightening around the rabbit. "His name's Mr. Whiskers. He keeps me safe." I glanced at Lorelei, who looked like she might break into tears at any moment. "We need to talk," I said, motioning toward a nearby bench. "Callie can play while we figure this out." Lorelei nodded, and we sat down as Callie wandered off to the playground, staying within earshot. I didn't waste any time. "Start from the beginning," I said. "I need to know everything." Lorelei took a deep breath, her hands fidgeting nervously. "Brent got involved with some shady people a couple of years ago," she began. "At first, I didn't think much of it. He said it was just business, some investment deal that would pay off big. But then he started getting paranoid, locking the doors, checking the windows, talking about people following him. And you didn't think to leave?" I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. She gave me a sharp look. "You think it was that easy?" By the time I realized how deep he was in, it was too late. They were already watching us. Watching me. "Who are they?" I pressed. "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "Brent never gave me names, but he said they were dangerous. Loan sharks, maybe. Or worse. All I know is that when he disappeared 6 months ago, they started showing up. Notes on the door, threats, and now, they're not just threatening me. They're threatening Callie." My jaw tightened. "And you're sure Brent's gone? He didn't just run off to save his own skin?" She nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "I wish he had. At least then I'd know he was alive. But they keep asking me where he is, like they think I know. I don't. And now they've started following Callie to school. I've seen their car parked outside the house at night. Nate, I'm scared." Her voice broke on the last word, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Why me, Lorelei?" I asked, my tone softer but still firm. "Why come to me after all this time?" "Because I know you," she said simply. "You're the only person I've ever known who doesn't back down from a fight. You're smart, resourceful, and honestly, you're the only one I trust not to screw this up." I let out a bitter laugh. "Trust? That's rich, coming from you." "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm begging you, Nate. If not for me, do it for Callie. She doesn't deserve this." I looked over at the playground, where Callie was laughing as she slid down the slide, completely oblivious to the storm brewing around her. My stomach churned. Lorelei might have been a train wreck, but Callie was innocent. And if what Lorelei said was true, she was in real danger. "Fine," I said after a long pause. "I'll help. But this doesn't mean I've forgiven you, and it doesn't mean I trust you. We do this my way, or not at all. Got it? Lorelei nodded quickly, relief washing over her face. Got it. Thank you, Nate. You don't know how much this means to me. Don't thank me yet, I said grimly. This isn't going to be easy. If these people are as dangerous as you say, we need to be smart. No more secrets, Lorelei. If you're hiding anything, now's the time to tell me. She hesitated for a moment, and I could see the gears turning in her head. There's one more thing, she said finally. A name. I overheard Brent talking to someone on the phone once. He called him Jonah. I don't know if it's a first name, a last name, or what, but it's all I've got. Jonah, I repeated, filing it away. All right. First thing we need to do is figure out who these people are and what they want. Do you have any of the notes they left? She nodded. I kept them all. They're at the house. Good. I'll need to see them. But we have to be careful. If they're watching you, we can't let them know we're onto them. Lorelei swallowed hard, her face pale. What do we do? I looked over at Callie again, her laughter echoing across the park. We start by keeping her safe, I said. And then we figure out how to end this, for good. For the first time in years, I felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I didn't ask for this, and I sure as hell didn't want it. But now that I was in it, I wasn't going to let anyone hurt that little girl, even if it meant facing demons I thought I'd left behind. The drive to Lorelei's house was tense. Callie sat quietly in the back seat, humming to herself and clutching Mr. Whiskers. Lorelei sat next to me, her hands fidgeting nervously. I hadn't been to that house since the divorce, and the idea of stepping back into that space churned my stomach. When we pulled into the driveway, I scanned the area. Everything seemed normal, no strange cars, no shadowy figures. But my gut told me not to let my guard down. Where are the notes? I asked as we stepped inside. Lorelei motioned toward a kitchen drawer. She opened it and pulled out a stack of papers, some crumpled, others neatly folded. I took them from her and began to read. The notes were chilling. We know where you live. You can't hide forever. Your daughter is a cute little thing. Shame if something happened. My jaw tightened as I read each one. These weren't idle threats. Whoever sent these was serious, and they weren't afraid to escalate. Did you call the police? I asked, already knowing the answer. She shook her head. I thought about it, but what could they do? I don't even know who these people are. I sighed. You should have at least reported it. Now we're behind. Lorelei lowered her head, guilt flashing across her face. I didn't want to make things worse. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on the notes, searching for any clues. Most were handwritten, but one had been typed. The print was clean and professional, too professional. This wasn't some low-level thug. These people were organized. Do you recognize this? I held up the typed note. She glanced at it and nodded slowly. It came with a delivery, a box. I didn't open it. It felt off. Where's the box? In the garage. I grabbed a flashlight and followed her. The garage smelled faintly of oil and damp cardboard. In the corner, I saw a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. It didn't have any markings, just my name scrawled on the top in bold letters. Nate? Lorelei's voice trembled. I knelt down and carefully peeled the paper away. Inside was a photo, a candid shot of Callie at school, holding hands with another child on the playground. Beneath it was a single bullet. My blood ran cold. These people aren't just threatening you, I said, my voice low. They're sending a message. Lorelei looked pale, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, what do we do? I stood up, my mind racing. First, we get Callie somewhere safe. Then, we find out who Jonah is and what they want. But we need to move fast. These people aren't going to wait around. For the first time, Lorelei didn't argue. She simply nodded, her fear mirroring my own. I didn't know how far this would go, but I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. We didn't waste any time. I told Lorelei to pack a bag for Callie while I double-checked the house for anything that might be useful. Documents, receipts, anything connecting her to these people. Every shadow in the dimly lit house felt like a potential threat. Every creak of the floorboards made me tense. Lorelei handed me the bag, her eyes darting nervously to the windows. "Where are we going?" she asked. "A motel," I said. "Something out of town. They won't expect you to leave tonight." "What about the house?" she asked, her voice trembling. "They'll know I've gone." "Let them," I said firmly. "It's better they come here looking for you than find out where we're really staying." She didn't argue. Callie was already half asleep in the back seat when we pulled out of the driveway. I drove in silence, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. A part of me half expected to see headlights trailing us, but the road stayed dark and empty. The motel I chose was small and unassuming, the kind of place no one would look twice at. After checking in under a fake name, I carried Callie inside while Lorelei followed, clutching the bag. The room was basic but clean, 2 beds, a table, and a chair. It would do for now. Once Callie was settled, Lorelei and I sat at the table. I spread the notes and the photo out in front of us, along with the bullet. The sight of it made her shudder. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "First, we figure out who Jonah is," I said. "You said Brent mentioned him. Did he ever give you anything more? A last name, an address, anything?" Lorelei shook her head. "No, just Jonah. But he used to get phone calls from him all the time. He'd always step out when he talked to him, but I heard the name more than once." "Do you have Brent's old phone?" I asked. She hesitated. "I think so. It's in a box of his things in the attic. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out." I rubbed my temples. "Great. We'll get it tomorrow. If there's anything on it, it might give us a lead." Lorelei leaned back, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Do you really think we can stop them?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I know we can't sit around waiting for them to make the next move." Her gaze dropped to the table, her fingers tracing the edge of the photo of Callie. "I don't know how this happened," she said softly. "I thought I was protecting her, but I've just made everything worse." I didn't have the energy to comfort her, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to. Lorelei's choices had put Callie in danger, and while I was willing to help, I wasn't ready to forgive. "Get some sleep," I said finally. "We'll figure out the rest in the morning." She nodded and moved to one of the beds, lying down beside Callie. I stayed up, sitting at the table, my mind racing. The photo, the bullet, the notes. They were all pieces of a puzzle I didn't know how to solve yet. But one thing was clear. Whoever these people were, they weren't going to stop. And if I didn't figure this out soon, they'd come for Callie, and maybe for all of us. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the chair, staring at the door, waiting for the sun to rise. The sun barely broke through the motel's dingy curtains when I decided it was time to move. Lorelei stirred as I pulled on my jacket. She blinked at me, groggy and disoriented. "You didn't sleep," she murmured. "Didn't have time," I replied curtly. "We need to go to your house and get Brent's things. If his old phone's there, it might give us a clue about Jonah." Lorelei nodded, glancing over at Callie, who was still sound asleep. "What about her?" "She stays here. I'll lock the door behind us. We won't be gone long." Lorelei hesitated, but eventually agreed. After a whispered promise to Callie that we'd be back soon, we left the motel. The drive back to Lorelei's house was tense. I kept my eyes on the road, scanning for any cars that might be following us. It felt like the walls were closing in, like we were running out of time. When we arrived, the house was eerily quiet. The blinds were still drawn, and nothing seemed out of place, but my gut told me to stay on high alert. "Where's the box?" I asked as we stepped inside. "In the attic," Lorelei said, motioning toward a pull-down ladder in the hallway. I climbed up first, the smell of dust and old wood filling my nostrils as I reached the top. Lorelei followed, nervously glancing around as if expecting someone to jump out of the shadows. The attic was cramped and cluttered, filled with boxes, old furniture, and forgotten relics of a life I didn't recognize anymore. Lorelei pointed to a box labeled Brent stuff in black marker. "This is it," she said. I pulled it down and opened it, sifting through the contents. Old receipts, a few photographs, and at the bottom, a cracked smartphone. "Got it," I said, holding up the phone. Lorelei let out a shaky breath. "Do you think it still works?" "There's only one way to find out." I climbed back down the ladder and sat at the kitchen table. Lorelei hovered behind me as I plugged the phone into a charger. To my surprise, the screen lit up after a few seconds. The battery was low, but it was enough. The lock screen was a photo of Brent and Callie, smiling on what looked like a beach. I felt a pang of anger just looking at it. This man who had abandoned his family and left a mess for everyone else to clean up. "Do you know the passcode?" I asked. Lorelei nodded. "It's Callie's birthday." I punched in the numbers, and the phone unlocked. Scrolling through the messages, I found several from a contact labeled simply as J. "There he is," I muttered. The texts were cryptic but telling. "Need the money by Friday. You're late again. Don't make me come find you. Call me. We need to talk." The last message was sent 2 days before Brent disappeared. "You've run out of chances. You know what happens next." Lorelei's face went pale as she read over my shoulder. Oh my God, he knew. Knew what? That they were going to come for him. He knew, and he didn't tell me anything. He just left. I gritted my teeth. "Coward," I muttered under my breath. Scrolling further, I found a few calls to the same number. I jotted it down and started searching through the phone's contacts for any more information. That's when I found an audio file, labeled Jonah. "What's this?" I asked. Lorelei shook her head. "I don't know." I played the recording, and Brent's voice filled the room, shaky and panicked. "Jonah, listen to me. I'll get the money. Okay? I just need more time. Please, don't do this. My daughter. She doesn't deserve this. I'll figure it out, I swear. Just don't." The recording ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Lorelei covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "He knew they'd come after her," she whispered. "He knew, and he left us anyway." I clenched my fists, anger boiling in my chest. Brent had gambled with his family's safety and lost. And now, we were the ones left to pick up the pieces. "Pack anything important," I said sharply. "We're not coming back here. It's only a matter of time before they show up." Lorelei nodded, wiping her tears. She hurried to grab a bag while I copied the phone's contents onto my own. As I worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside the window, made my skin crawl. I was right. As we loaded the car, I noticed a black SUV parked down the street. The engine was off, but I could see the faint glow of a cigarette in the driver's seat. "Get in the car," I said quietly, not taking my eyes off the SUV. Lorelei froze. "What? Why?" "Just do it," I hissed. She climbed in, and I slid into the driver's seat, starting the engine. The SUV's headlights flicked on immediately. "They're following us," Lorelei whispered, panic rising in her voice. "Not for long," I said, gripping the wheel. I slammed my foot on the gas, the tires screeching as we sped out of the driveway. The SUV roared to life behind us, its headlights blinding in the rearview mirror. This wasn't just about notes or warnings anymore. They were coming for us now. The SUV stayed on our tail as I weaved through the streets, pushing the car harder than I ever had before. Lorelei clutched the armrest, her knuckles white. "Nate, what are you doing?" she whispered, fear etched across her face. "Losing them," I said through gritted teeth. I took a sharp turn onto a side street, hoping to shake them, but they followed, their engine roaring louder as they closed the gap. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging through me. "Callie," Lorelei said suddenly, her voice trembling. "She's alone at the motel." "I know," I snapped. "We'll get to her. Just let me handle this." I took another hard turn, this time into an empty parking lot. The SUV followed, its tires squealing as it tried to keep up. But I had one advantage, local knowledge. I slammed the brakes and spun the wheel, pulling the car into a tight U-turn. The SUV overshot the turn, giving me just enough time to floor it back toward the main road. "Did we lose them?" Lorelei asked, her voice shaking. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The SUV was gone, at least for now. "For now," I muttered. "But they'll be back." We didn't waste any time getting back to the motel. My hands were still shaking as I unlocked the door. Callie was sitting on the bed, hugging Mr. Whiskers, her face lighting up when she saw us. "Mommy!" she cried, running to Lorelei. Lorelei scooped her up, holding her close. I shut the door, locking it behind us. We need a new plan, I said, pacing the small room. They know where you live, and they're not going to stop. We need to disappear, completely. Lorelei looked at me, tears brimming in her eyes. How? Where can we go? I stared out the window, my mind racing. Somewhere they won't expect. But first, we need to figure out who Jonah really is. And we need to do it fast. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was survival. And I wasn't about to let them win. The next morning, I started making calls. I didn't have many connections, but I knew a guy, Marcus, an old friend from my college days who had transitioned into private investigations. He owed me a favor, and I wasn't above cashing it in. After explaining the situation and sharing the phone number tied to Jonah, Marcus promised to dig into it. Give me a few hours, he said. But Nate, if this is as dangerous as it sounds, you better be ready for what I might find. While waiting, I packed up the room. We can't stay here, I told Lorelei. We'll head west, keep moving until we know more. She didn't argue, just nodded as she helped Callie into her shoes. The fear in her eyes was hard to ignore. As we loaded the car, my phone buzzed. It was Marcus. You're not going to like this, he said. What did you find? I asked, dread settling in. That number belongs to a guy named Jonah Harker. He's not just any thug. He's tied to a trafficking ring. They move everything. Money, drugs, people. If Brent got involved with him, it wasn't just about debt. Jonah doesn't let loose ends walk away. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. So, they're not just after Lorelei for money. They're after her because Brent screwed them over. Exactly. And if they think she knows where Brent is, or worse, what he did, they'll keep coming. I hung up, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. This wasn't just about protecting Lorelei and Callie anymore. It was about stopping something bigger. We drove for hours, heading into rural areas where cell service was spotty and strangers didn't ask questions. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting that black SUV to appear at any moment. By nightfall, we found a small, run-down motel off a dirt road. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. While Lorelei put Callie to bed, I sat at the table, going through everything we had. The notes, the recording, Brent's phone. It all pointed to Jonah, but there was no clear way to stop him. Lorelei sat across from me, her face pale. What do we do now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. We fight back, I said. We can't keep running. If we don't deal with this, they'll never stop. How? She asked, desperation in her eyes. We give them what they want, I said. We find Jonah, and we make him believe you don't know anything. That you're just a scared woman trying to protect her kid. Lorelei's face twisted in fear. And if he doesn't believe me? Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance to hurt you or Callie, I said, my voice firm. The plan was risky, dangerous, even, but it was the only way to end this nightmare. The next morning, Marcus called again. He had managed to track Jonah to a warehouse on the outskirts of a nearby city. It was where he ran his operations. I didn't tell Lorelei everything. I didn't want her to panic. I told her to stay at the motel with Callie while I went to check things out. When I arrived at the warehouse, the tension in my chest was unbearable. It was a decrepit building, the kind of place where bad things happened. I slipped inside, staying low and quiet, until I found him, Jonah, sitting at a desk, flanked by two men who looked like they ate steel for breakfast. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the shadows. Jonah Harker, I said, my voice steady. His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. And who the hell are you? The man who's going to make you a deal, I said. For the next 10 minutes, I laid it out. Lorelei didn't know anything. She wasn't worth the trouble he was putting into chasing her. All he was doing was wasting time and resources. Jonah studied me, his expression unreadable. You've got guts, walking in here. But I don't deal with nobodies. Then deal with me, I said, stepping closer. Let her go. Let the kid go. I'll make sure they disappear, and you'll never hear from them again. For a moment, I thought he'd laugh in my face, or worse. But then, he nodded. Fine, he said. But if I even think you're lying, I'll find all of you, and you'll wish you were dead. When I got back to the motel, Lorelei was waiting, her face pale with worry. What happened? She asked. It's over, I said simply. But we're not staying here. Pack your things. You and Callie are leaving tonight. Her eyes widened. Where are we going? Somewhere far away, I said. I have a friend who can help you disappear. New names, new lives. They'll keep you safe. Lorelei started to cry, but I didn't have it in me to comfort her. I was doing this for Callie, not her. By midnight, I had them on a bus headed out of state. As I watched it pull away, a strange sense of relief washed over me. It was finally over. Or so I thought. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. There was no return address, just my name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a single note. You should have killed me when you had the chance. Jonah's message was clear. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But if he thought I was going to roll over, he didn't know me at all. I was done running. If Jonah came for me again, I'd be ready. For now, though, I was content with one thing. Callie was safe. And that was all that mattered.